Hi everyone, I'm Airier, and here we're checking out Miscellaneous myth by overly sarcastic reduction, specifically Artemis and Apollo. Now, someone might ask, Airier, have you been waiting to do this for no specific reason, just decided to do this because you said we're at 100,000 and figured, hey, this is a great way to celebrate because you realized you hadn't done this even though you thought you had, and then you jumped in and did this? One, why are you in my head? Get out. Two, no, I would never say that. More importantly, we're going to do it. You guys know the deal. There's a link below to the original video. Hit it up and let's get started.
In the field of mythology in general, and Greek mythology specifically, fraternal twins, where one is a boy and the other is a girl,
Apollo, yeah.
are very unusual. Twins in...
Wait, they are? You know, I'm just so used to thinking of, oh yeah, the Greek twins, Artemis and Apollo. It never occurred to me. I can't think of any others except for two that came up in FGO and I can't remember their names. So that's like two pairs that I can think of altogether.
General aren't. Castor and Pollux, Helen and Clytemnestra, Heracles and Iphicles. If you get late enough in the myth cycle, you even get Romulus and Remus when Rome
that's more
rolls into
Roman.
town. But fraternal twins of different genders are quite rare, not just
Oh,
in
so
Greek
not the same
mythology, but in
gender.
mythology overall. You do get Freyr and Freya over in Norse mythology, but
Okay, I didn't actually know they were twins. I thought they were just siblings, so that's on me.
in general, the identical twins far outnumber them. Even in the pantheons that share hypothetical Proto-Indo-European roots with Greek mythology, the only twins we really run into are identical. The Ashvins in Hinduism and their twin sons Nakula and Sahadeva, Luke...
Because if they're identical, it shows duality, and that makes a lot of sense. So fraternal would be a weird choice, I guess. That's really reading into it, though.
Gulita and Meslamtaea in Babylon, the Dioscuri in Greece, the always identical divine
Dioscuri, that's the one, yeah. Okay, yeah, that's the one I knew from FGO.
twins are even a reconstructed Proto-Indo-European god archetype, so take that with as many grains of salt as you want. But the bottom line is, mythology in that slice of the world is loaded with identical god twins and very sparse in the
so it's not
fraternal
that twins
god
are weird,
twin
it's the
department.
fraternal
In
aspect.
the mortal cases, Greek mythology is fond of having twins where only one of them has a divine parent, but in the case of twin gods, they are almost always all the way identical.
Wait, only one has a divine? Not even going to think about it. That's just whatever.
And function basically as two copies of the same guy. Which brings us to a perhaps rather obvious line of inquiry. Where did Artemis and Apollo come from? We've discussed in previous deep dives how the roots of different Greek gods...
You know, I shouldn't be surprised considering all the other times Red goes into deep dives on the gods. We get the entire progression of the various, well, progressions of the god. Ishtar to Astarte to Aphrodite to some weird combination amalgamating them together but separating them based on the preference at the time, and that's a lot of shit going down and then backing it up. So I guess we're doing that with... Wait. Is it going to be one of those weird things where they were actually the same person at first? Sure, why not? It almost happened with Aphrodite, so why not?
Gods can be traced through the historical record.
Corey to Despona. Oh, yeah. Hades' wife, yeah.
With varying degrees of accuracy.
Underworld gods and how Hades essentially took over a lot of the things, the horse thing. Yeah, from the chthonic Poseidon.
Certainty and success to paint a possible picture of...
Pan and Hermes both originating from the original Pan, and how that Pan might also have led into Dionysus as well.
Where these gods geographically and culturally originated, how they changed and moved over the
Speaking
centuries,
of,
and what social pressures or changes may have affected...
Wait, the margins of society, psst, got any drug society? And then the cult is the drug going into it. Okay. Although this would be more of an amoeba. Single cell organism? Single cell organism.
Their characterization over time. Aphrodite's glow-up is one of the more dramatic and obvious, as her central role in Rome's mythological origins helped keep her very solidly documented over the centuries, and
kind of brought her back
origins
closer to
are
the
pretty
original.
well agreed on in the scholarship around her. But some gods are trickier to track, and right out the gate, Artemis and Apollo are giving us trouble, because when...
This is giving... Okay, just to give an idea. When she went into Dionysus, there was a lot of detail there, and it was a lot of conjecture that she backed up with as much speculation and what little documentation there was, and then pulling out mythology and the meanings behind the various terms, but acknowledging that could be speculative. And that didn't say anything about how that gave her trouble. And she's starting this early in by saying this is giving her trouble. Is this going to be one of those weird things where they weren't actually connected and later became connected as twins? Is this going to be one of those cases where the concept of blood siblings, but not like the actual by blood, but like, brother, I give you my blood. The over-the-top masculine thing that a lot of people do when they're trying to do the 80s style macho action movie stuff where it's like, we're not actually related by blood until we share the bloody handshake. That level. And it just panned out to be two gods later that became synonymous with that. I'm spitballing here because this is the weirdest thing I can imagine. And frankly, the last few times I've done that, Red has said they were right later, so I'm just trying to throw something out that can't be real. For example, throwing out how there were some things where it may or may not have been connected to Jesus through Dionysus, and that was freaky. Most likely wrong, but, I mean, there's a Jesus Dragon Slayer version out there, so yeah, why not?
When we go looking for likely candidates for where they might have come from, we find nothing. There are no convenient brother-sister twin pairings in any of the surrounding areas.
At all.
Certainly none that match their divine domains of archery, medicine, hunting versus civilization, etc. But this lack of information does act.
So that would imply they're not actually initially Greek. Not too weird. We know that the Bronze Age had travel, but there would be things there if there was travel at that time. Were they later or for some or further?
Actually give us one very important clue right out the gate. Artemis and Apollo may have their origins in non-Greek cultures, but they don't seem to have started out as a matched set. Now, this is not actually the weirdest thing in the world. We have to remember that gods are not people, and their genealogy is not set in stone. Hermes seems to have started his life as an offshoot of the god Pan, and was later written to be Pan's father, and Persephone's parentage oscillates between Poseidon and Zeus depending on where and when you're asking. So it is not too bizarre to consider the possibility that Artemis and Apollo did not start their divine existences as twins, but were two initially unrelated gods that became twins over time.
So the blood brother thing is actually looking closer. Bovide female deity? Bovid? I don't even know what that word is.
One thing, if we go looking in the Linear B inscriptions from the pre-Greek Dark Age Mycenaean civilization, we can find Artemis in the ledgers of Pylos, but we cannot find Apollo anywhere. This does not
Wait, what? Oh! So Artemis was at least mentioned in the Mycenaean. She say Mycenaean, so I'll just that way, but not Apollo.
Categorically,
was he just taken from Helios,
or a god who would become Apollo did not exist in Mycenaean Greece? It's possible he just had another name. For instance, we actually can find two names that later became epithets of Apollo, Smintheus and Paeon, attested at Knossos. But it does mean that Artemis and Apollo were not at this point two of a pair. Their names or epithets aren't listed in the same areas, and it's not even clear if Apollo exists yet, while Artemis's worship was solid enough that it has an actual archaeological record to back it up.
Those aren't paintings! I thought it was just a real... Yeah, I thought this was actually just a weird painting, but no, that's wear on rock, isn't it? If you look back here, I thought it was a painting, but this is holding out further, so that's... Dude! Looks like a person hunched over, or is that a bull? I honestly can't tell, but that looks like steps.
With artifacts from as far back as the Greek Dark Age found at the temple to Artemis Orthia in Sparta. Again, a lack of information gives us information. With Artemis attested in Linear B, we can pretty solidly assume she was a Mycenaean god.
Found in the tablets at Pylos. I wonder if she did an entire video about Pylos itself, because that seems like a fascinating topic.
If she has foreign origins earlier than that, we don't really have a chance of figuring out what they are. But Apollo's absence is interesting, and suggests he might have a more far-flung origin. This is potentially supported by the fact that the etymology of his name is uncertain, and there's no obvious Greek root for what it means, though Apello...
Wait, there... Oh. To destroy, to set free, always shooting, simple. Does seem similar to how they would describe Artemis, so maybe that's why they did it. Also washing.
Has been suggested, which would mean wall or fence or place where people gather, which could potentially match up with his role as a god of civilization in contrast with Artemis's stewardship of the wild, but it's disputed and possibly nonsense, so who knows. So there is still a pretty hard limit to how much information we can get from no information. Now, while Apollo's place of origin is...
And that already proves that this is way more complex than Dionysus, because she went into so much more detail about the linguistics behind that. And here it's a matter of, even this is too much speculation to go into beyond acknowledging that someone has speculated it. This is so cool. I'm sorry. This is literally just sugar to me right now. Speculative history, because it's in there somewhere. Something is real, but we have no idea how. And I just, this is fun.
Isn't known, it is interesting that he has an awful lot of myths about coming to Greece from somewhere else, most of which are discussed in his Homeric
I actually don't
hymn.
know these
To start
myths.
with, he and Artemis are born on the comparatively far-flung island of Delos because
I actually don't know where that is, but enjoying your Mediterranean Grand Tour? Why don't you come on down here and find out? Oh, God.
Hera used her goddess powers to forbid their mother Leto from giving birth anywhere closer to home, giving a plausible mythological reason for why Apollo would have had to join the pantheon late and from somewhere else. Reinforcing that theme, in Delphi, Apollo's major cult center, he was mostly revered for slaying and usurping the Python, described in...
Really? Oh, and that's why they mentioned Pythos was one of the epithets. And if he was slaying it, so that maybe is a reference to him usurping the Mycenaean version. But what's the Python then? You guys aren't mad, right? I foresee the property values rising? Oh, yeah, because giant snake doesn't attract people nearly as much.
And the hymn is a monstrous dragon and the offspring of Typhon. So in broad strokes, Apollo is born outside of Greece, comes to Delphi, seizes control of Python's place of divine power, and takes his place as the local god. That looks like an...
Yeah, that would be Turkey. No, I'm not really sure who controls the island. It's probably Greece, though.
Analogy for a new god rolling up in the neighborhood and finding his niche in the pantheon by force if necessary. The hymn also describes Apollo wandering the world for a while, looking for the perfect place to establish his center of worship, and
I'm thinking pillars over there, a statue over here, maybe a few more pillars for flavor. This is interesting. Hymn to Apollo. I'm not even going to try and say this name. Chios? Yeah. What time period did this come from, and what was happening around this time, history-wise? Was there a major invasion or a war where people would have moved around and brought ideas back? I don't know, because I do not know this work, so it's completely beyond me. But chances are Red will get to it. I'm really hoping she does.
At one point abducting a crew of Cretan sailors to be his worshippers.
Cretan?
We'll get more into this later, but it paints a picture about how the Greeks might have thought of Apollo by the roughly 500s BCE, which is when the Homeric hymn to Apollo was supposedly written. They seem to have thought of him as a
500 BCE. Okay, so 500 years prior, so roughly 2,500 years ago. I curse my inability to do anything when it comes to dates. I cannot place anything that happened at that time period, mostly because I can't do dates to save my life.
A well-established and broadly well-respected deity who, nonetheless, came to Greece a little bit late in the game. But we're getting ahead of ourselves. Let's stick to the timeline and see what we can find that way. After the Greek Dark Ages, the first big source we have on hand is, of course, Homer's Iliad and Odyssey. And lucky for us, Artemis and Apollo are major players in the Iliad. But interestingly, they're both firmly on the antagonistic and non-Achaean Trojan side.
Oh! Yeah. You know, that random thing I said, maybe he's Turkish. Is he? Or from even further than Turkey, for all I know.
Now, admittedly, so is Zeus. So this doesn't mean that...
I mean, to be fair, Zeus, him being on the antagonistic side doesn't really matter, just because he antagonizes everyone. I mean, mostly the Greek and support the Trojans, but he has a habit of fucking everything. I know what I said.
Trojan-favoring gods were automatically being framed as foreign, scary bad guy gods or anything, but they were on the same side as Aphrodite, who we know was a Phoenician import god, still kind of getting her legs under her.
Oh yeah, because at this time period, she would have not been nearly as... Would she have been as important to the group at this time period? Still getting her legs under her, yeah, but... I just wish there was more... Problem with trying to put all these together and figure out how people understood it. It's basically comparative fan fiction to see what changed where from what. I just can't get good Tyrian purple around here. Wow, that's so weird. I've literally seen my wife and her sisters have this exact conversation. I was not expecting to see that. It's kind of weird.
And Ares, a god the Greeks seem to have generally disliked. And the way these two are characterized in the story is a little odd when you compare it to their later portrayals. Not everything is weird. A lot of their very consistent character traits are established. While they aren't explicitly referred to as twins in so many words, they are full siblings. And Artemis is a great huntress and archer and the patroness of wild beasts with a habit of divinely smiting people for wrongdoings, disrespect, and possibly shits and gigs. While Apollo is the liar.
I mean, the last one does sound like an entire, hey, you're related to Zeus type thing. Great huntress, patroness of wild beasts, kills Niobe's daughters, archer queen, unleash the Cladonian boar, gets absolutely spanked by Hera? I do not know this part of the myth. Oh, that's actually completely new to me. Ooh, neat. Apollo plays the lyre, leads the muses, kills Niobe's sons, spends 9 days firing arrows at the Achaeans, guides several of Troy's heroes, far darter, spreads panic among the Achaean forces, professional hater, and being hated. specifically by successful romance.
Airplay leader
Surviving.
of the Muses, who is also an expert archer who strikes down mortals on the regs, and he's already established as a major god in Troy, as Agamemnon disrespecting his priest is what kicks off his direct intervention in the war. Achilles.
Oh, I knew that. I even heard that before. What the hell? Oh, buddy, if you could die, I would so kill you so hard. Wow, man. We've all got dead boyfriends, okay? Oh, God.
At one point describes Apollo as the most malicious of all gods, but Achilles is explicitly pretty biased, so we don't need to take that as 100% factual or representative of the popular attitudes at the time. Artemis and Apollo are both also described as healing various combatants, making them stronger and cooler looking, and other general god things that are pretty much part.
They're gonna love you out there. You weren't even that stabbed. I need to remember that line.
Of the course. But while all this sounds pretty much in line with what we expect, elements of their characterization seem a little bit off from their more well-known versions. For one thing, despite Artemis being described as a powerful hunter goddess and the mistress of wild beasts, when the gods square up to fight each other, Hera literally beats the crap out of her with her own bow and sends her crying to Zeus.
With her? Oh, wow. Okay. I was unaware of that part. Also, I didn't know Hera was a fighter in the slightest. God damn. Well, literally, actually. Yeah. Also, I just love the face Apollo over here is making. It's like, oh, good for you, sis. I'm going to pick you up afterwards.
This doesn't really line up with her strong and wrathful goddess of the wilds thing, though in fairness, Artemis might be suffering from the Worf effect, especially since Hera is the most powerful goddess in the Pantheon. And
wait, really? She is? Honestly, I always thought it was Athena. My husband lets you get away with anything, but you are not queen. Oh, God. I don't know why, but for some reason, I think this is a Game of Thrones reference. I don't know why. I have not seen enough of that show to make a reference to that.
This scene specifically is dedicated to proving that, and more broadly to proving why the gods don't fight each other directly. But while Artemis is literally spanked and sent crying home to daddy, Apollo is portrayed a little more respectfully. He's still framed as a bit of a terrifying dread god, but he's also smart enough to not pick a fight with Unky Poseidon and
So, you don't want to go a few rounds? Yup. Huh. Honestly, it would have been kind of cool to see that fight, unfortunately. Unless it's also a complete blowout like that other fight. Was not expecting Hera to be the one to do it, though.
Subsequently get his ass beat, so he comes out of the whole situation looking less arrogant than his sister, which could have been intentional. We can't read too far into this, and this is just me conspiracy boarding again, but if Artemis was already a well-established and powerful Greek god at this point, but Apollo was a slightly newer addition to the Pantheon, one way to give him credibility would be
the Worf effect, not just showing Hera's strength, but by showing someone's wisdom by comparison. Because you don't need to establish Artemis anymore. She already has her followers. Oh, that's actually kind of brilliant. And a very, well, it's called the Worf effect now because the technique works. Star Wars, Star Trek, Battlestar Galactica, Babylon 5. Most things have used it to some extent to show that you're about to have a tough enemy by beating someone who you thought was a tougher enemy. Piccolo. Just throwing it out there.
To explicitly portray him as superior to his sister, wiser and on better terms with the other gods. This isn't the only time the Iliad makes an explicit statement about a newly integrated god, as it also goes out of its way to declaw Aphrodite's apparently pre-existing war association.
I mean, considering the entire war association was literally her fault, and Artemis's fault. Actually, no, sorry, Athena's fault and Hera's fault. Actually, it's just everyone's fault. Hell, you can even fault Odysseus for setting up the organization that brought everyone to fight against Troy when Helen was kidnapped. So, oh yeah, you actually could do that. That wasn't even a joke. That's actually a fact. Huh. Aphrodite, you silly girl. What were you doing out in the battlefield? Oh, tee, I don't know what I was thinking. Yeah, don't mind the red color. It's definitely not blood. Definitely not. Yeah. Honestly, I'm kind of surprised Red hasn't made that joke yet.
When Zeus firmly and blatantly tells her she has no place on the battlefield. And also, it would be pretty disingenuous to not acknowledge that the ancient Greeks had some strong opinions about gender roles that might possibly be being reinforced here.
Yeah.
The gods are much less centralized in the Odyssey, so the only references we get to Artemis and Apollo are
I would literally rather die than keep dealing with these suitors. No? Aw. Oh, I'm sorry. This is literally the funniest interpretation or depiction or anything I've ever seen of Athena, and I absolutely love it.
Distant and reverent rather than personal
Red done
about
an
the
Athena
exploits. And the main theme is
video
that
yet?
they seem to be credited with causing sudden, unexpected deaths with their divine arrows. Again, not their most friendly look. One common interpretation of this is that Artemis and Apollo's arrows represent illness and corresponding sudden death, which would make this an early instance of their incidental association with medicine. When a
Wait, what? I was about to say plague, but that does indicate why there's so many arrows as people struck down by sickness. Actually, if their arrows are associated with plague and they're depicted that way, was there some kind of illness sweeping around here that would inspire that? And there is indications that a lot of illnesses and plagues did spread due to, well, travel. I mean, that's how the Black Plague got around, because of international trade. What little there was, and it was a good bit. So, were the gods coming with the plague, and that inspired this depiction?
God is in charge of killing you in a specific way, you might pray to them specifically to not do that. Another important player referenced in the Iliad is Artemis and Apollo's mother Leto, who is, like her children, on the Trojan side of the conflict. During the big god fight where Artemis gets whacked, Hermes is squared off against Leto, but respectfully refuses to fight her and asks her to...
What? Ah, the pain! What a falsely executed full Nelson! You're a sweet kid. Huh. Hermes doing that is actually really kind of fascinating, considering where his god versions maybe came from. Split between Dionysus and Hermes, and... Huh. Why? That's the only question I have here. Like, did he know something, or was this a call out that people at the time would have realized making it Hermes doing it would matter? See, this is the part where I always get tripped up in my own head. We know what we believe about them now, and we know what they're being depicted as here, but what was the common context for people understanding the gods at that time? Would they have had the full suite of, okay, here's what we believed about this god, here's what other people believed about that god? Was that information common? Was that information really weird? Was that a kind of secret information only the priests would know because they had the full accounting of their god? Or was this just like, oh yeah, hey, check it out, we got that Phoenician god who we're now worshiping. This is a different version of her. She's way better this way. They were just wrong. I don't know. And so much context would be wrapped up in that because it does matter. But we don't know, and and for all I know, it could also be that the context wasn't there because this is just what they believed, and they didn't realize there was context. And this is fascinating to me. I'm so frustrated, and I love every second of this.
Tell everyone that she beat him fair and square. Then she gathers up Artemis's dropped bow and scattered arrows and goes off to comfort her after her vicious ass beating at the hands of Hera. And it is interesting that while Artemis and Apollo are framed as kind of terrifying and antagonistic...
Oh wait, Leto was still alive during that fight? For some reason, I just thought this was well before the Trojan War. And it was just like random time shit? Okay, I just got confused apparently.
Leto is afforded only the highest respect by both the gods and the narrative overall. We don't
Really?
get much more about Leto here, but we do get a little bit more in the Theogony by Hesiod, which was written around the same time as the Iliad and the Odyssey, and is again one of our earliest post-Dark Age written sources. The Theogony says that Leto and Zeus were together before Zeus married Hera, and thus Artemis and Apollo are Zeus's kids from a previous relationship with no explicit drama involved.
So Hera beating down Artemis was literally stepmom being an ass. Granted, dad was also an ass, so, bad family dynamics. Got it.
Also, again, only says that Artemis and Apollo are the children of Zeus and Leto. It does not say whether or not they are twins. This no-drama family picture severely contrasts with the version we get a few centuries later in the Homeric hymns, which give us a very different and more familiar rundown of the circumstances of Artemis and Apollo's birth.
Okay.
Of course, it's not immune to its own weirdnesses. For one thing, the Homeric hymn to Apollo describes Leto giving birth to Artemis on the island of Ortygia, the location of which is uncertain because it could be referring to a half a dozen places of the same name, including one all the way at the boot end of Italy. And then...
Actually, that would be kind of funny if one of the gods the Greeks used was actually initially from a place that became Roman. Italian. Close enough. No, physically closer at least. They re-imported a god in that case. Also, for everyone out there in my family who might see this video and realize I just said Sicily was Italian and also Roman at the same time, I'm not going to apologize. We've had this conversation. No, I'm not getting into it anymore. Seriously, stop.
Then Leto gives birth to Apollo on the island of Delos. Now I know they're gods and I know the rules are different, but I'm counting this as evidence for my "these guys were not always twins" theory, because giving birth to twins on different islands seems wildly impractical. And
I don't know why, but my mind just went to One Piece and Ace's birth. I'm not going to say any more in case that's a spoiler, but yeah.
in fact, the Homeric hymn does not call them twins. Now, perhaps they are still implied to be twins by the fact that they both seem to be the result of the same vaguely defined one-night stand with Zeus, and it's biologically unlikely otherwise, but they're gods, man! The rules are weird! Anything can happen! Yeah. Anyway, the hymn explains that Leto is having an absolute bear of a time trying to find a place to have her baby/babies, in large part because of Hera, who is very angry at this whole situation. And while the causality is not directly stated in the hymn, fear of Hera's wrath is implied to be a large part of why all the places Leto tries to settle down to have her baby kick her out again.
I'm sorry, I just really empathize with the "I'm done with this" face on here right now. So yeah, Leto got that one right. Oh no, the stars are all wrong. Sorry.
The only exception is the island of Delos, which is pretty crappy by island standards and devoid of all the classic appeals of a hunk of rock in the middle of the ocean, and Leto swears on the river Styx that her glorious golden sun will skyrocket the property values with his biggest and baddest temple if Delos will let her have her baby already, and the island agrees. But Hera does not, and keeps Aletheia, goddess of childbirth, on a short leash for 9 days and nights until the other...
I feel like I'm forgetting something. So you fold? So there was a goddess of childbirth. Aletheia. I did not actually know about this one. I only know the major ones and some of the minors. A lot of the minor gods, which I didn't realize there were so many. Completely unaware of a lot of them. That said, 9 days. Yeah, I've had multiple nephews and nieces born, and I fear for my brothers who had to appease their wives and failed. 9 days. That is not, I'm in pain. That is, I am going to rip this kid out of me. Levels of pain. If I tell this to my wife, she will make me feel pain. God damn. Actually, I might want to see her just to see her reaction. It might be funny before she rips my face off.
Other goddesses fire off a message to kick her out of bed, and she zips down to help Leto out. Apollo is finally born, and everyone is really impressed with how cool and badass he is, and he declares that the lyre and the bow will be his symbols, and he will speak the will of Zeus. In celebration, Delos blooms with golden flowers, and true to his word, no matter how many temples Apollo gets, his shrine at Delos is always the best. And Artemis is presumably also there, but the Homeric...
Okay, this is... literally going Lion King over here, and no, I guess this would be Mufasa, and this is Scar. Just little baby Artemis. Yeah, she's fine.
Hymn barely mentions her, so whatever. The hymn to Pythian Apollo goes into more detail about some of the shenanigans Apollo gets up to, and the singer recounts a short list of some of Apollo's many lovers before settling on the story of how Apollo found the perfect place to sit his oracle. After a very scenic Mediterranean grand tour, he settles on the area of Crissa, lays out the foundations for his temple, and then casually scoots over to a nearby spring currently populated by a terrible dragon, Python.
Oh, and this is where this part came from. So you wish to challenge me.
And kills it, gaining the epithet Pythian and naming the place Pytho in one fell swoop.
Hubris.
Then, of course, Apollo decides his fancy temple needs people to work at it, spots a nearby trading ship from Crete, and decides those are just the guys he needs. Obviously looking to win first place in the Simple Solution Olympics, he turns himself into a dolphin and launches himself onto the deck of the ship, furiously shaking and rattling the boat whenever they try and throw him off, so they have no choice but to leave him flopped on the deck while he summons the winds to steer them way off course. When they finally go to ground near Crissa, Apollo zips off the ship, gets the temple all shiny for the new visitors, and strolls out in all his glory to give him the good news.
Seriously? I mean, that's one way to kidnap people. You threw yourself as a dolphin at them. This is not a matter of the Greek gods are so inhuman. This is a matter of this guy is playing around, and I kind of love it. I'm almost wondering if he was written up as a joke god because of this. This is insane. Usually when there's shapeshifting around, which there's a lot of, it's way more dignified, or it's Zeus not being dignified. Actually, never mind. It's almost never dignified. This is actually kind of funny.
To honor his heroic exploit of kidnapping a ship full of sailors while shaped like a dolphin, the area is given the name Delphi. The Homeric hymns to Artemis...
That's why it has that name. don't know why, but I suddenly feel so let down by reality.
Are a lot shorter and a lot less morally whack somehow. They mostly praise her prodigious hunting skill, her virginity, and how she loves nothing more than racing through the mountains, firing arrows in every direction, except when she wants to unwind, when she scoots back to Delphi to party with her brother and the Muses to sing about how they're the greatest gods in the entire pantheon. Hubris. It's okay when the gods do it. Now it's worth noting.
Yeah, I mean, except for the part where she got smacked down by Hera, but we're going to ignore that.
That at this point in the timeline, Artemis and Apollo really haven't changed all that much. They've been remarkably consistent since the Iliad. Apollo is an extremely well-respected god of archery, prophecy, and music, with hints of healing thrown in the mix. Artemis is a more wild goddess of archery and the hunt. They are explicitly full siblings, even in the stories that don't specify in so many words that they're twins, and they are overall very well-liked gods whose many feats are a credit to their divine mother Leto, even if those feats do involve killing an awful lot of mortals for often very flimsy reasons.
Yeah.
Hesiod's Astronomia, another early source from the 700s-ish BCE, around the same time as the Theogony and the Homeric epics, lists a number of constellation myths that Artemis is involved in, giving us another look at her.
I gotta ask, is that a beaver? What is that? I do not know.
Her early post-Dark Age characterization. Artemis appears in the myth of Callisto, hunting wild beasts in the mountains before transforming Callisto into a beast herself.
Wait, what does that say? Oh, relax. Bears make great moms. Oh, God. I've seen the Miscellaneous myth Ursa Major. Ooh, I haven't seen this one yet. I need to check that out.
Orion is described as a hunting companion to Artemis and her mother Leto before being killed by a monstrous scorpion sent by Gaia and turned into a constellation at Artemis and Leto's behest. Later in the 300...
Wait, was that another one I haven't seen? What'd that say down there? I see a Miscellaneous myth Orion. You know, this video is just pointing out there's a ton of these Miscellaneous myths I thought I had seen and didn't. Need to fix that.
Later, in the 300s to 200s, Aratus' Phenomena does the same, describing a different version of the Orion myth.
Again, another Orion, which I still don't see. Ladies!
Artemis kills him herself for trying to assault her. Apollo is less common in the constellation myths, but significantly more common in myths about his lovers and the resulting kids. Pindar wrote the Pythian Odes in the 400s BCE, which reaffirm Apollo's status as the leader of the Muses, but also starts getting into his tumultuous love life. For instance, Pindar describes the birth of Asclepius, son of Apollo and hero turned god of medicine. The gist is Asclepius' mother Coronis sleeps with someone else while pregnant with Apollo's kid, and
I thought we had something special. Don't worry, bro. I got this. Yahtzee! Woo! Sorry, I just imagined someone shouting Yahtzee, and in this situation, that is the weirdest thing I can imagine. I don't know. That's the weird part. Yeah, that's what would get me weird on this one. Admittedly, if you're engaging and someone says Yahtzee, I have so many questions, and all of them are, oh, I should probably run now.
Apollo gets big mad about it and sends Artemis to do some vengeance, but crucially doesn't tell her when to stop, so Artemis's divine smite leaves a lot of collateral damage, which...
Damn. Yeah, I couldn't remember what she looked like. Oh God, this is the second time. It's just her failing to kill or being beaten that just leaves him going, oh shit.
Does support the idea that Artemis and Apollo's arrows sometimes take the form of a plague. Apollo saves the unborn Asclepius from his mother's funeral pyre and gives him to Chiron to raise.
Why does he smell like smoke? I don't want to talk about it. And the best part is, it's not actually even his fault on this one. Indirectly, sure, but not even as direct as most gods get.
Asclepius later uses his medical skills to bring someone back from the dead for money.
Charging money for life-saving medical treatment? Unconscionable! Greek medicine.
And Zeus strikes him with lightning about it. This is probably one of the earlier instances of Apollo being associated with medicine, indirectly through his son. But other than that, this story mostly reaffirms what's already been established. Apollo has powerful oracular omniscience, a strong musical bent, and a propensity for sharing the stage with the Muses,
and asking his sister to help him, and then she does things that maybe were not intended.
His sister Artemis is terrifying.
Good at murder.
There is one little crucial shift that we find around this time. Along with the hot goss of the Pythian Odes, Pindar is also the first writer I can find who explicitly states that Artemis and Apollo aren't just siblings, they're twins. Greek? He says as much in a fragmentary papyrus describing the story of their birth from yet another angle where they're both born at the same time, which makes sense. By the 400s BCE, Artemis and Apollo were officially twins. Things start to shift more seriously when Rome becomes more of a thing closer to the tail end of the BCEs. The Romans made my life personally a lot more difficult by enthusiastically syncretizing their own gods with the Greeks, and Artemis...
Wait, syncret... Oh. You know, for some reason, I thought they just stole the gods wholesale. What were the Roman gods prior to stealing a lot of the Greek everything? That I really don't know. And honestly, it probably was essentially whatever was Proto-Turkish that was becoming or became a mix of what is Italian now and pre-Roman tribes, I guess. I don't actually know what was there prior to the Romulus-Remus story. I really don't know. Again, history, it's big. I want to learn more about it.
Artemis is no exception. The Romans seem to have just taken Apollo wholesale, with temples popping up in Etruscan Italy as early as the 500s BC.
The eyes, man. The eyes just... It's just... How? Like, everything else is reasonably detailed. And then you have an eyes like...
CE, and a cult of his manifesting in Pompeii around the same time, hitting Rome.
Wait, what did that say in the background? What did that say? I am a normal mountain. Come close. Pompeii. Oh, God. Oh, that's what Pompeii looks like. Oh. I've seen pictures of the town. They're always down facing. I never actually looked up and saw the mountain itself. Or, sorry, volcano. Caldera? Future murder site? Yeah, take your pick.
Time, hitting Rome proper in 431 BCE with a temple dedicated to his healing aspect. And the fact that Apollo evidently didn't already have a similar Roman equivalent knocking around is pretty solid evidence for the idea that he's a quite late addition to the region, which is...
Because there wasn't a proto-Roman one that they syncretized. They just took him whole cloth. But that still doesn't answer the base question we started off all the way back in minute 2. Where did they come from? And the only guess I could say is maybe Turkey or further to the east as well. Actually, it'd be kind of hilarious to me if it turned out they were initially based on something maybe from India or even further.
It's most likely why he's the only major Greek god whose name remains unchanged by the syncretism. But when it came to Artemis, they did have a deity they could conflate her with, their own hunting goddess Diana. Around 200 BCE, the Roman poet Ennius listed the 12 major Roman gods in his Annales poem, now preserved only in fragments, and 2 of them are Apollo and Diana. A couple centuries later, Virgil gives us a much better preserved text in the Aeneid, and name drops the twins' Roman editions on the regular. Virgil describes
Chase leader of nymphs, powerful archer, sacred wild places, groves, lakes.
Diana as chaste, accompanied by similarly chaste followers, and majestically leading a dance of nymphs while armed with her trusty quiver. In short, Virgil's description of Diana lines up very well with the Homeric hymn's description of Artemis, right up until it doesn't, when he casually...
3-faced triple deity. Trivia. Wait, that's where trivia comes from? Witchcraft association with Hecate, Nyx, and Erebus. That is very different.
Drops the idea that Diana is a triple goddess like Hecate, a deity very commonly represented with 3 distinct faces and aspects and divine power over 3-way crossroads, where Hecate's 3-faced statues, the Hecatio, were commonly found. Virgil also references Diana alongside Night, Erebus, Chaos, and other extremely witchy gods in the context of Dido doing some very spooky magic, and he references her in brief retellings of older Greek myths, but uses the epithet trivia, meaning triple. None of this triple symbolism was in the mythology or the iconography of Artemis, so this seems to have been a strictly Roman addition. The epithet trivia, the triple nature, and the association with spooky chthonic gods. This is quite a shift and a very cool one. Diana does...
But she brings up chthonic gods. That's always one of the questions. Is this them conflating it, or is this bringing forward something that they kept that the Greeks had lost? Admittedly, it's the Romans, so I'm assuming they're just stealing it whole cloth and adding it in, but there's always the chance that maybe they just had something earlier that survived longer to be conflated with a later edition. Everything I just said sounds stupid, but I'm sure someone out there is going to get exactly what I'm talking about because it's something that would happen in conflicting fan fictions. God, my geek is showing today.
Doesn't have as much statuary as Hecate does, but Roman coins from the last years of the BCEs show a tripled Diana, a recreation of a cult image to Diana Nemorensis from a sacred grove turned temple dedicated to her in the region of Nemi, Italy.
And they even have the 3 different outcroppings here. I'm not actually sure what they'd be called in the temple.
That had seen continuous use since the 500s BCE, meaning that Diana...
500s, which is roughly when I think Apollo started to become more noticeable. So Diana might have actually predated, not just in Proto-Roman society, but in Proto-Greek society.
As triple status was centuries old by the time the Romans started conflating her with Artemis. The Aeneid, meanwhile, mostly refers to Apollo as Phoebus, the epithet meaning bright, while Diana...
Feel free to avert your eyes. She's just looking at him pissed off. Or maybe just in pain, I can't tell.
Diana is described as a dark counterpoint to him. They're referenced together more often than not, and Aeneas is at one point urged to do a sacrifice to each of them, reinforcing their characterization as a matched set. But there's one part of their characterization you might have noticed we haven't found yet,
twins?
and that is their astronomical side. After all, Apollo is famously a god of the sun and Artemis of the moon, but we've gone through more than 800 years of myths without even a hint of their most iconic symbolism.
Yeah, that's because I know at least in the Odysseus side, the Odyssey, and the Trojan side, that was Helios specifically who is doing the sun. When did Apollo usurp that? Or usurp that? Maybe that was a more Roman thing, because I'm pretty sure Diana was already the moon. Maybe that's what pulled it over.
So when and where did that crop up? Well, surprisingly late. It doesn't come up at all in the pre-Roman myths, even in the places where it would make sense.
It actually might
to
have
bring
been
it
Roman.
up, like the various constellation myths Apollo and Artemis are wrapped up in, where their celestial counterparts would be very easy to loop into the narrative. The first clear evidence we have of the connection is as late as 45 BCE, when Cicero's Nature of the Gods said...
It can't be that Cicero, right? No, wait, 45 BC. What time did he say this?
Artemis are wrapped up in, where their celestial counterparts would be very easy to loop into the narrative. The first clear evidence we have of the connection is as late as 45 BCE.
Okay, shit, it might actually be that Cicero. For anyone wondering why I'm geeking out over this, one, unless it's someone else who just has the name Cicero, Cicero himself was an orator in the Roman Republic prior to Caesar taking over, which would have roughly been around the 0 CE time period. And let's put it this way. You can find English translations of the speeches that Cicero gave, and they make sense in a translated English language thousands of years later, and there's still really good processes of, oh, this is good thought. The guy was a genius, and Caesar also attributed him as one of the only people he truly feared, not because he was a martial person. He had no fighting ability whatsoever, but because he was so damn good at convincing people and listening to him and being a not swayful. Wow, that's not even a word. An influential politician to get people to listen to him. And more importantly, find people who would and sway the nature of people, that if he actually tried to fuck over Caesar, it might have worked. Also, he tried to fuck over Caesar and got murdered. Now, try is maybe not quite there. It's more, I think he opposed Caesar's initial rise. It's been a while since I read the biographies of him, but he's a fascinating character. And the fact that he's a real person whose writing is still impactful and probably has been cited in American legal theory as a basis for our initial founding documents. Yeah. Also, other founding documents, the fact that, again, his writing actually holds up thousands of years later when translated. It's actually fascinating. I'm geeking out over him, I realize. But still, if you're here and you're surprised I'm geeking out, hi, I've been doing this a while.
When Cicero's Nature of the Gods says outright that Diana is the goddess of the moon, while Apollo is the god of the sun, and further links Diana's moon association with pregnancy and childbirth, something that's been in Artemis's extended purview since the early myths, where in some versions she assisted in her own twin brother's delivery, which is a hell of a visual. It's a nice connection that lines up well with their divine domains, so it makes sense that it would catch on, but it also makes sense why it wouldn't have been a thing before the Romans started mashing gods together, because there were already Greek gods of the sun and moon, Helios and Selene, referenced as early as the Theogony alongside their sister Eos, goddess of the dawn. Helios turns up in the Odyssey, and Selene and Helios are the subjects of their own Homeric myths, meaning they were clearly distinct deities for a while. The sun and moon are probably some of the easiest natural phenomena to assign gods to, so it's not too much of a stretch to assume that Helios and Selene are some of the oldest gods in the pantheon, or even the pre-Greek theoretical Proto-Indo-European pantheon.
Oh, Walter Burkitt's Greek religion. On the other hand, Helios, Sun, and Eos, Aurora, the goddess of dawn, are implicable Indo-European lineage both in etymology and their status as gods, but among the Greeks, they stand in shadow of the Olympians. Really, a god of the dawn standing in shadow? There's irony in there. Wow. There's so many things I wish Red made videos specifically about. These gods, for example,
Maybe she did. I missed it. Like fist fighting each other about. But when Rome rolled up with their habit of syncretizing gods left and right, the similarly and yet very different fraternal twins, Apollo with his bright associations and Diana with her dark wild ones, must have made very tempting targets for just a little more divine conflation to give them command over nature's own similar and yet very different celestial phenomena.
Makes sense.
By the time of Cicero, Apollo is solidly the god of the sun, and Artemis/Diana is the goddess of the moon.
So that gives roughly about a 500-year time period from being separate to being that interpretation, which is kind of the one I think most people have of them now, which is admittedly a lot faster of a turnover than we've seen for a lot of the other gods, where it was, or at least it felt like it was over thousands of years in various interpretations and cultures and locations.
Of course, once the Romans roll up, we start looking for old, reliable Ovid right around the start of the CEs, and Ovid has gossip plenty about the twins. This is where we find a detailed retelling of the story of Niobe, who brags about having more children than Leto and therefore being a better mom, at which point Leto's 2 children slaughter Niobe's children and she turns into a rock about it. This is Ovid's version of a myth that was referenced as far back as the Iliad, so this is pretty classic stuff.
Okay, so that was in the Iliad, so that's actually... Now, the only question I would have is that indicating that it was old, or that it was added into later editions of the Iliad because someone thought they could touch it up. I mean, that someone would have to be able to rhyme with the style used in the Greek initials, or the way the Greek... Actually, no, Greek has actually stayed remarkably consistent over a long time period, both in language and culture. So, well, maybe not culture, but in language. So it actually probably wouldn't be that hard if someone knows the language and how to rhyme to start with. I can't, so I would never do that, but that's different.
It also recounts a few of Apollo's ill-fated romantic exploits, including Daphne, who turns into a tree to escape him, and Hyacinth.
Wait, what did that say? Hyacinth I know, but Daphne? That's what I get for insulting Eos's aim. Nice work, asshole. Suffer, Eos. Or suffer from Eros.
And Hyacinthus, who's into the relationship and then dies anyway. Meanwhile, Artemis, or Diana, is less of a major player and is instead portrayed as a bit of a distant force of nature. For instance, she sends a massive boar to ravage Calydon when its king fails to honor her with the other gods. And this appears to be her default method of conflict resolution / conflict escalation, because according to some footnotes, there are versions where Diana also sends a boar to kill Adonis because Ares, or Mars, was jealous of how much attention Aphrodite, or Venus, was giving him, which is honestly kind of a bro move on Artemis's part. Ovid's version of the myth of Callisto features Zeus / Jupiter taking Diana's form and seducing Callisto that way.
Zeus took Diana's form. Oh my. How do you do, fellow maidens? Miscellaneous myth, Ursa Major. Again, I need to check these out.
At which point Diana...
Eternal maidenhood. It's not a hard concept. It is literally the simplest option. So you're not going to help me raise it? Oh, God.
Exiles Callisto for violating their virgins-only policy. Diana is also referenced at several points in the tale of the unfortunate nymph Arethusa, who is pursued by the extremely horny river Alpheus. Diana does several acts of divine intervention to facilitate her escape, and ultimately turns her into a freshwater spring to get her out of there for good. Ovid tends to mark the point in the timeline where the gods have reached their final consistent characterization. And all things considered, Artemis and Apollo have an interesting developmental curve. Artemis is thoroughly ancient, pre-classical antiquity minimum, and seems to have been worshipped in the wild, dark places and feared when she gets mad and encroaches in the civilized ones. But Apollo seems to have come out the gate swinging as an instant beacon of power and civilization, creativity in the arts, appearing in the Homeric era with a cavalcade of myths about coming from a far-flung exiled birth.
This is actually fascinating. Mostly because it shows clearly how a lot of the current interpretation is, and Rome fucked up because they could, which is, in fact, incredibly simplistic and it makes it a lot easier to understand. But also kind of covers up the fact that the parts that don't make sense are really hard to figure out. And probably won't be, because any document surviving that long would be obscenely ancient.
Apollo continues to serve as a god of music and the arts, leader of the muses and a dealer in creativity and inspiration. But he also stays firmly planted in the city centers, with oracles and priests and power and a long list of superpowered lovers and heroic offspring, while Artemis's power over the wilderness and its wild creatures and the people who choose to leave the structure of civilization to forsake love and partnership and join her in the hunt is only exacerbated when she gains Diana's chthonic triple goddess crossroads symbolism and later power over the moon. Apollo is a god of civilization, Artemis of the uncivilized wild. Together, they cover basically everything the average ancient Greek is liable to deal with on a daily basis. It's almost unsurprising that they slowly absorbed more and more symbolism. If Apollo is the god of light and civilization, why wouldn't you also tie him in with the daylight, the time where civilization gets most of its civilizing done? And if Artemis is a goddess of navigating the wild and dangerous wilderness, why wouldn't you give her power over the moonlight that casts the world in shifting, uncertain shadows, that commands the nighttime when the animals she hunts are the most active? Artemis and Apollo fit together. Narratively and aesthetically speaking, they're just plain fun. And they're
actually, talking about it like this, it makes sense why the Greeks did it. Sorry, not the Greeks, the Romans moved them to fit this pattern, because it's like she said, they already had the symbolism matching up. Adding on extra aspects to fit with their own gods at the time, the Romans kind of just simplified the process for them. I mean, they did a lot more work to bring other gods in to syncretize them as it is, so I guess this was actually just an easy one for them. Probably wasn't even that hard.
They're also dangerous, fickle, and unpredictable.
As
Their
every
divine
god was.
domains contain multitudes, and those multitudes contradict. Artemis is a defender of young women, and also the goddess whose job it is to kill them. She helps hunters and gives people who don't want to marry a career option in divine protection, and she also unleashes wild animals on innocent towns whenever she's provoked, and kills any hunter that gets too hubristic about their own skill. Apollo is a god of music and creativity who leads the muses, mistresses of inspiration, and one way to interpret his many mortal lovers is a metaphor for creative inspiration, striking at random and often to devastating effect. And another way to read it is that Apollo's disastrous love life is a nightmare because he does not take no for an answer, making his relationship with Artemis, the protector of young women who intercedes when they're attacked, a very blatant conflict. And that can make my flavor of storytelling difficult. I mean, how are we supposed to like these guys? How can we be cutesy and fun about these people that have done so much fucked up stuff? Well,
I mean, that's probably why she hasn't done Zeus. So the fact that she made this video implies she found some way.
there's a problem in our premise. At the end of the day, when we analyze any god, we have to remember that they are not people. These contradictory characteristics, blessings and atrocities doled out in equal measure, protections and injustices inflicted on hapless mortals, these are not moral actions being taken by human beings. Artemis and Apollo are gods that existed through a civilization for nearly a millennium, and in that...
Yeah. Actually, I'm wondering if this entire section she's saying right now would be why she eventually does make a Zeus and Hera video, because before she has explicitly stated there's things she's not going to touch, and you know, she can always just skip over it, and maybe that's how she ends up rationalizing it to make that video still. I don't know, and honestly I don't care, because I'll like whatever she ends up making instead, but it would be fascinating if this is the rationale and she's talking herself into it while we're watching it.
At that time, they were the subject of many stories. Why are the Greek gods so fickle? Why don't they always help the people they care about? Why does the mistress of the
I mean, there's a lot of times when they try and help someone they care about and it makes it worse, so helping is fun.
hunt both protect and kill her hunters? Well, probably because sometimes hunters live and sometimes they die. Sometimes arrows rain down from heaven and the people they strike get sick, and sometimes they just as randomly get better. And if you worship gods that represent those realities, those gods are not going to be entirely benevolent. If you tell a story to explain the world, especially if you tell that story over 1,000 years, the story is probably not going to be entirely happy. And I think that's what makes the story so interesting. When we unravel one of these gods, we are getting a glimpse of centuries of civilization and generations of people making sense of the world around them. That civilization is long gone, the people are long dead, the world they lived in a very real sense, no longer exists. But
and everything she just said is actually why I find this fascinating, because it is an encapsulation of all the stories that we have in a much simpler package now, but that has roots that go into so many different locations. It's why I loved it in the other videos where she had more resources to pull back and show where things might have developed, especially in the Aphrodite video and the Dionysus videos. Those were fascinating. I almost wish we had more of them here, but it's just lack of information is a lack, and you can't get around that.
the stories they told about the world and each other are still here. And two
see
of
the
those
answer, but
stories
not the
happen to be
question.
named Artemis and Apollo.
Dude. I'm sorry, this is just so freaking cool to me. Everything about this, it didn't have nearly as much of the ancient aspect and trying to pull from where the god initially was. Just the knowledge that, yes, Artemis was a thing and she was vengeful. But also Apollo's big thing was not, I'm the greatest fighter. It's, I know not to challenge people who could beat my ass. Followed by my sister, who challenged Hera. I didn't realize there were many god fights going on, but apparently that was one. It just, this is... There's so much here. And also a lot of references to other myths, the videos that I thought I had seen all of them, but apparently not. I need to get to. So yeah, if there's any videos I should get to immediately, let me know. These where she goes into the overall arching gods, the Olympians, these are great. But apparently there's so many more I missed that are now supporting evidence for these later videos that I didn't even know about, and I need to fix that. I absolutely love how so much of the early stuff is, here's where they are. They're very consistent. We know he's from somewhere else. We don't really know where, but who knows? Maybe there'll be an update to this video sometime in the future where maybe a discovery is made because a building was torn down and they found ruins underneath it and it had tablets or inscriptions that showed further documentation of a god at a much earlier period. And if that sounds wishful thinking, that's literally most archaeology in Europe, the Middle East, China, India, significant portions of South America. You don't really realize the South America part because a lot of it's covered by jungle, and you don't really think to look under that because you don't think there's anything there. And then you find it and it's insane. Again, there's temples that had rivers made of mercury, display rivers of mercury that people didn't know about until they fell into a cave and saw it. And this is real, and it's crazy that it is real, and maybe we will. It's not impossible. Will they do it in my lifetime? I have no idea. Who knows? But it's always that little tantalizing piece of we could find out how things were changing. And overall, Artemis and Apollo were really straightforward. They weren't gods that were twins. They were siblings because they came together. Apollo came in. They were syncretized in the Greek side, it seems like. And then later they were syncretized as twins because the paradox between civilization and the dark of the forest and the wilds, sun and the moon, just became too easy to make. So, sure, the Romans were already throwing things together. Why not make the easy one? It's one of the easier progressions to follow, except for how it started. And that's the part that's the most fascinating. If anyone has any other information on that, let me know. I probably want to make a video out of it if it's like an actual textbook, but I would find that because that is something I want just on my own. Yeah. Also, if there's any videos I've apparently missed a ton of that I need to check out, let me know, because apparently I thought I had caught up to most of the miscellaneous myths. I did not. That's on me. Also, random aside, first video I've made after hitting 100,000 subscribers. I'm still a little giddy over that. See you guys in the next one. Adios.